All right, functions.js. This is going to be more different than Java, but there's still a lot of things that should seem familiar. Okay, so we're going to define functions in several different ways. Um, but let's start with a comment block that kind of explains what a function definition looks like. So, function definition, what are the elements of a function definition? Starts with the keyword function. That's different than Java. Followed by the function name. Yeah, that's similar. We need to name our methods in Java like our functions. Followed by the parameter list in parentheses. The concept of a parameter list in parentheses is the same. However, no types are specified, unlike Java. Okay. There's no types with our variables. There's no types with our parameters. Arguments are arguments are passed by value. That's just like Java, right? Think back to APCSA when you're filling out like the half sheet of paper to do a physical model of calling a method. You copy the values from the variables onto that form. Same thing in JavaScript. And just like Java, after we have that first line of the function header, it's followed by a function body in curly brackets. Cool. So lots of similarities. I think this will look kind of similar. Let's write a function called mean, which takes two parameters, x and y, and it returns the mean of x and y. So function keyword, function name, parentheses for parameters, parameter variables specified, x and y in this case, but no types. Function body defined by the curly brackets, defining the scope of the function. We have regular code inside. I guess also notice, let's add one more thing. I didn't think of this to mention this. No return type specified, unlike Java. I kind of glossed right over that at first. Notice like it doesn't say mean returns a number or an object. And if there's not a return, we don't say void. So the return type is not specified in our function definition. Kind of long, I mean, it's consistent. It's along this whole idea of like in JavaScript, we don't worry about types. It's not a strongly typed language. A function can return a number or a string or nothing. We don't really care. All right, let's see what this looks like. So if I do console.log and then I call the function mean and pass in 3 and 7, we hope, let's see, 3 plus 7 is 10 divided by 2. It should log 5. Let's explore some things that are a little bit different than Java. Okay. What if we call a function and don't specify a parameter? In Java, it won't even compile. In JavaScript, it runs just fine. It's just that unspecified arguments are assigned a value of undefined, kind of like properties in objects. So if we write a function called say hello, and we expect one parameter name, and then we do console.log, and we're going to use the backtick operator here. So we can say hello, $ curly bracket name, like we learned a couple days ago. If we then call the say hello method, but we don't pass anything, we don't pass an argument in the parentheses, it will print hello undefined because name is undefined. There you go. 5, hello undefined. Okay. That's definitely different behavior than what we're used to with Java. There is no compiler, so no, but like you can get exceptions, yes. Um, Yeah, because for example, if something is undefined and then you try to get a property of that thing, like you expect it to reference an object, it can't do that. So you get an exception in that case. Yeah, so there's still exceptions in JavaScript. Um, for sure, for sure. Um, this isn't really a difference, but it's a new emphasis for us. And that is functions are what we would refer to as first class citizen or entities, first class entities, and may be assigned to variables. We can do this in Java. We just haven't much, maybe once, but that's it. So here's what that would look like. I can create a variable called math operation, and then I can assign it a value of mean. And so the value of this variable math operation is a reference to a function. Okay. This can be like really powerful because I could, potentially assign a variety of different functions to this variable over time. And then when I do console.log and I do math operation and I pass in 9 and 5, it will call the mean function and pass along the arguments 9 and 5, return a value of 7, and that's what gets logged to the console. We often will want to assign functions to variables in JavaScript. It's really, really common, unlike what we've done in Java. And what we just wrote here totally works. We can define a named function like we did with mean, and then later we can assign it to a variable. But this concept of assigning a function to a variable is so common that we tend to do it with like a more concise shorthand in JavaScript. And there's two ways to do that. The first way is called a function expression. A function expression is where there is no name. I'm sorry, no function name to be clear. There is no function name after the function keyword. What does that mean? So here's what it looks like. We're going to do the assignment to the variable and the definition of the function all at once. So I'm going to say let average, which is a variable, equals function. So just like we started here, function, but no function name. I'm immediately going to specify the parameters, and then I'm going to specify the code. This is exactly the same functionality wise is what we did by defining mean as a standalone function and then assigning mean to the variable math operation. Here we did it all at once. Okay. So this is more concise. There's really no point if we're never going to invoke like the function by name, we're just going to assign it to a variable, then there's no point in the giving it a name because we're never going to use it. And so this is more concise. We would do that like if we wanted to have like functions embedded in our objects. Um, or often there are a lot of functions in JavaScript built into the JavaScript library. There are functions that take as arguments other functions to do things. And so we could write that whole other function and then pass the name of it in as an argument. Usually we just define it in a more concise way. So we will see several examples of this over the next couple of days. All right, but to be honest, we never do it this way. I'm just sharing this for completeness. It's like a bridge. So I want you to see the connection between this is most like Java. So we're like, okay, I'm comfortable with this. We lost the types. I can deal with that. All right, here we're assigning a function to a variable. That's new to me, but okay, I get that we've defined this function. Now we're assigning it to a variable. Next step along our understanding, all right, I'm defining the function and assigning it to the variable at the same time. So if I'm doing that, I don't need to put a name here because I'm just assigning it. So that's I'm comfortable now with that. But here's the way we actually do it. We actually do it with something called an arrow function. These are the most common ways that I see functions defined in JavaScript. So this is a more concise syntax for function expressions. It's still a function expression. It's just more concise. Some similarities, the parameters are listed in parentheses. That's the same. Nice. The parameters are followed by the arrow operator. Okay, the arrow operator is an equal sign followed by a greater than sign. That's a change from the function expression. The return keyword is implied. So we don't need to use the return keyword. It's implied if we're using the arrow function. The thing in the body is what's going to be returned. When we evaluate that expression, whatever it evaluates to is returned from the arrow function. Here's an important connection. It is very similar to lambdas in Java. I know we haven't done a lot with lambdas in Java, but we did do some with like the map standard library function. We did do some with lambdas in some of the test code for one of our chapter 17 activities with visitors. We did see a little bit of lambdas in that context, but I appreciate like we're going to need a lot of practice with lambda expressions before we get comfortable to it. Let's see what this looks like. We could say average. So that's our variable name, right? So we've already declared average up here, let average. So I'm reassigning a value to average. We would say average equals x comma y arrow operator x plus y divided by 2. So please look very closely at the code starting on line 37 and the code we just wrote on line 49. Variable name is the same, average equals. Here with the function expression, we have the keyword function and then the arguments. We've omitted the keyword function. We just have the parameters. I'm sorry, parameters, more proper term. We don't necessarily have the curly brackets to define the function body. If it's like a one-liner, we can put it immediately after the arrow operator, and we don't need the return keyword in that case either. So I appreciate that this is challenging to parse in our head as we read this line of code. With practice, it will become second nature. Okay. But this our notes today hopefully help you see the progression from something that's very familiar, like this, to something that's still identifiable, to something that looks kind of weird, but you can see the progression from one to the other. Yeah. Yeah, great question. Let's give me like 30 seconds. I have an example for you, but I want to show one other thing first. That's a really good question. Um, Different question I want to answer first is what if there are no parameters? What does the syntax look like? So if there are no parameters, use empty parentheses. We still need the parentheses. So I can say, I'm going to declare a variable hello. It's going to be a constant, meaning I can't assign another value to it. I'm going to assign it a reference to this function, which takes no parameters. So I have open and close parentheses only. I have the arrow, and I'm just going to say console.log, hello world. Oh, can't spell hello. There we go. So even if you don't have parameters, you still need the parentheses because really the combination of the parentheses with the arrow operator is what makes this an arrow function. Okay. All right, now to get to the question. Multi-line arrow functions must use curly brackets and the return keyword. So we can only omit the curly brackets and the return keyword if it's a single line of code. If it's multiple lines of code, it's going to look a lot more like a traditional function. So for example, we could say average equals x comma y, but this time let's implement it in multiple lines of code. So I could say const result equals x plus y divided by 2, return result. We would never really implement it this way, but just to force it on multiple lines. Oh, here, this would be more, let's say const sum equals x plus y, return sum divided by 2. That's a little bit more authentic. So again, yep, great question. If we need multiple lines of code, we've got to have the curly brackets. We've got to use the return keyword. Yes, that takes no parameter. I don't know. Let's find out. Apparently, it just ignores it. Yep, it's like, okay, yeah. So just ignores it. We're going to see more flexibility later in terms of like, we can have a variable number of parameters, and like JavaScript is very flexible with that as well. So that's probably a side effect of that. So, which again is not something we see as much in Java. All right. So let's call this average as well, just to show that it works. We can say console.log average 3 comma 7, and that's going to print 5.